That's a fact, man. Uh oh, Swallow's in the house.
Yeah, so I was reading up on that, the lost tapes, and what they say is that more than likely, because it was the policy back then, and that because videotape of that quality was very hard to come by and expensive, that they more than likely erased it sometime in the early '80s and reused it for something else. It was like high.
Yeah, let's erase. I'd be curious as to what they recorded over it because I'd like to know what is so freaking important
uh,
to
Debbie Does
to
Dallas
record
with
over
Deep
that.
Throat.
I guess something. Let's just erase mankind's greatest achievement and put some other bullshit on there. We don't know what it is because can't even figure out what we did with all of that data. Just you know, hey, shit happens, right?
Yeah, they said what it was is that, like, because it had broadcast successfully, which they weren't sure it would, and because so many people took low quality recordings of it, they didn't even think about it. They're like, whatever. But yeah, that would have been amazing because it's really high quality videotape that the original recordings were on would have been much better than the grainy shit that we have now of that achievement. You know.
What do you think about that, Swallow?
Uh, yeah, I only wanted to just put give it like a 2 minute input because I'm about to go and do some shopping. But I was overhearing you talking about the grainy footage that was coming through from the moon. It wasn't projected against the wall or anything like that. So it was like projected onto just a normal tube TV at NASA, and it came through it at about 400 pixels in size. So it's about 4 inches by 4 inches in size. So that was why the TV camera crew from the news and ABC and all that sort of stuff, like NBC, got a camera and pointed it at someone else's screen to be able to have the ability to be able to zoom into it. So yeah, that's why it was grainy, and it was obviously the information was transported, via the radio waves. So there's no what do you call it? No film from the moon. It's effectively going. It's like transmitted from radio waves, and of course they put it onto their own film and beamed it around the TV networks.
Well, that kind of uh, goes against what they say when they say, "Oh, it's high quality film, so we probably erased it,
The
recorded stuff on
I
it."
think look,
So they
I think
they
there's
got
only
that
one
part
or two
wrong.
reels which they've erased, and that was the telemetry data. So they didn't necessarily have reels recording the landing because it came from a digital camera. It came from something that was transmitting digitally over or analog over the radio waves.
It wasn't film. It was actually early videotape, but it was like much higher quality if in terms of visual um acuity than what we saw on television.
But I mean, we're talking about 400 by
Well,
400 pixels. That's 4 inches across. They were obviously just trying to cut through they were trying to deal with bandwidth because there's no extra antennas 20 miles away or anything like that, so they were trying to transmit through space, and so they were dealing with the amount of bandwidth that they wanted to be able to go and get at least the noise and the video camera, and so that was what their current bandwidth was.
I mean, it's pretty insane all the limitations they had to work around. Like in terms of communications and filming and all that stuff. I mean, everything they had to calculate very precisely all the things that they could bring with them and figure out where they had to cut corners in order to make the weight and all that shit.
Yeah, 100%. And I mean, the dish that they set up was probably, I think it was only about, what, 2 foot wide or something like that. And they basically, the minimum they really needed to do was just to set it up on a tripod and point it at the earth, and it would be good enough because, radio waves propagate, sort of, they sort of radiate out. So as long as it was pointed at the Earth, it would be good enough.
That thing had like a 50-mile range max.
So why did they need
21.
I've seen you say that before, but realistically, it's going through the vacuum of space, so it doesn't matter.
It's going through the Van Allen belts too.
It does matter. That's why they had to send it through New Zealand to these receivers that would filter everything out. They had some type of
You know, to this day,
Well,
they
hold on a
still
second.
have,
It was
because they basically got noise.
to this day they still have
and so it had to go through.
they still have Earth to Moon to Earth transmissions. So somebody had to set something up on the surface of the moon, or those wouldn't be possible.
Wait, what transmission are we talking about? Because wasn't Buzz Aldrin on a show talking about how we did not actually view live footage?
He said they didn't have television cameras. He said what you saw was animation.
Yeah. So like they had.
He said the audio was real. He said the audio was real. He said, you know, and he went through what he said, you know, but he said the video, because Conan says, yeah, I remember my dad waking us up when we came downstairs and watched you guys land on the moon. He said, no, you didn't. No, you didn't. He said, yeah, I remember. And he said, no, you didn't. He said, we didn't have television cameras. He said, what you saw was animation.
Exactly.
That's
So
why
what
they
is
needed
Swallow
Kubrick.
talking about right now?
Okay. There may have been there was animations back then to be able to help people to understand.
Yeah, it was
But
a
the
cartoon
actual
animation on TV. We did
there
not
was tons of
observe
them.
the
Yes.
live footage. What Ken was
Yes.
talking about was the footage that they presented to the public. They took the recording, the actual recording, and then it's as though they wanted to purposely degrade the footage the way they presented it. They presented a recording. Sorry, they presented a footage, and then a person recorded the footage that was being projected. So it almost seemed like they were purposely trying to degrade the footage so nobody can catch on to what they were actually doing.
I don't know if you're talking about the same moment that I was talking about. We're talking about like when they said, you know, that first feat. You know, when Neil Armstrong set foot down on the moon, it didn't need to be degraded. When you talk about 400 pixels by 400 pixels, it's bloody small as it is.
Yeah, but we didn't see
I'm
that
just saying
live.
that he said they didn't have television.
Well, that was transmitted live. Yes.
No, it wasn't. It
But-
was
but of course there was
over the
public
radio.
watch.
The radio was They had the radio broadcasting
Wait a
the audio, but there was no visual footage of it until after their return.
So here's my thing. I grew up in the 70s and 80s, and you see stuff about the moon landing all the time. They talked about it all the time. No one ever came out and said, "Oh, well, really, you know, that video you see, that's, you know, that was an animation. We're just putting that up there so you can get an idea, so you can see and you can understand." Nobody said that. They presented it as filmed evidence of a moon landing. Now they're saying it's animation. Now they're saying, "Oh, we did it for understanding."
So I don't know
They weren't telling the public that. They
who's
weren't telling
they.
the public. It's broadcast on TV. The same people talking about the moon landing from NASA. Anybody on TV, anybody that has supposedly had any knowledge about the moon landings. I wasn't sitting there taking notes on each person who's talking about what's going on. But you see them on TV. I grew up watching that stuff. Nobody ever said, well, actually, this isn't actual video footage of the landing. This is actually animation that we made to go along with the audio. But nobody ever admitted that. Nobody ever said that. Nobody ever made that clear. People walked around for decades saying, we've got video footage of the astronauts landing on the moon. And now people these days want to say, well, of course it was animation. we didn't have, we didn't have the capability to do all that.
Yeah, it's their pivot.
Yeah, it's easy to say now, but nobody was telling that to the people in the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s,
Hey, Ken,
the 2000s.
can I make one comment? My comment is actually there is no there's no technical footage of Apollo 11 landing from the outside, right? The footage that they purport, because I mean I wasn't born in the 60s, right? So the footage that they show is them putting their feet down on the ground. Now that happened 3 hours after the landing. So so I mean there may have been, I think there is footage from Buzz from the inside of the actual cabin where he had filmed recording of it going down, and I believe I have watched that, but that would have had to have come back, like 5 or 6 days later and been watched 6 days after, because that was on a film. But there is no radio based or like transmitted based footage of a landing, because they didn't have that ability. So the only thing that was a live radio telecast was when they put their feet down, and that came from a camera that was on the leg.
What about when they took off? And they left?
There is, I believe that I think I've seen this as well. It's the same thing as what I was talking about with Buzz Aldrin. He had a camera stuck up against the window, and they said, 3, 2, 1, and then they shot off, and then the camera is pointing down and seeing the dust plume and them lifting. So there's no footage from the outside of Apollo 11.
That's the only footage I've ever seen.
Well, the other,
It's from the outside.
there's three types
like
of footage from the
little
outside.
sparkles of light.
There's three types
Yeah,
of.
it looks like little sparkles of light.
Yeah,
There's no thrust.
That's not Apollo 11. That's like Apollo 15, 16, and 17. So 15, the camera didn't
I
pan.
don't
It did
care
a
which
terrible
one it
job.
is.
Well, those are the late ones. Those are the ones when they had landed,
Well,
when they had the rovers.
that camera panned just fine.
That wasn't
It followed
17.
it up.
That's number 17. So number 16,
followed
number
it up.
16 didn't pan right, and number 15 didn't pan at all. But Apollo 11 didn't have any of this sort of stuff. It had nothing. The only thing it had was it had the camera on the leg, which recorded Neil Armstrong jump down. That's it. And the camera insides.
Well, we don't even really have that, because all we have is like what televisions.
Well, I'll be able to go on YouTube after I do my shopping. I'll be able to go on YouTube and I'll be able to find you the two pieces of footage. One footage of Neil Armstrong doing landing. It's rather shitty format, obviously, because it's terribly grainy. And the other one where they're actually blasting off or landing. I'll see if I can find both of them. The ones where Buzz Aldrin has the handheld camera up in the window. I'll try to find them for you, but I'm going to go shopping. I'll leave you to all your talking. All right, I'll see you later.
Yeah, I'm just watching some of the footage now from Apollo 11, and it looks like a film, like a movie back from that time, like 2001: A Space Odyssey type of stuff.